Jillian, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my questions. I cannot wait to splice this up with your answers so we can share more of the Rhino Keeper with the world. So, attention readers, there will be spoilers or close to spoilers. There are tons of questions here, but I couldn't walk away from this book without knowing more about Jillian and her writing process. So, the first question, Dawa. I'm now on board with the pronunciation of Dawa. At the beginning of the book, where Dawa bought Clara, how much of that was based on real events and how much of that was kind of invented? I know you had to fill in a lot of gaps with the story and question if that whole dinner scene really happened or if you just sort of made that happen from what you knew.
Hey, so great question. A lot of that was actually true. So I had a hard time finding a lot about Clara Dawei and Jan Sichterman when they were in Calcutta. But what I did find was that the Calcutta scene that I wrote about the dinner party was most likely something that would have happened. Clara was used as dinner time entertainment, and she really did lick the plates of the guests at Sichterman's dinner table. Sibylla Sichterman really did send all of her children back to Holland when they turned 7 years old. And I still don't know to this day if Dawei was gifted or purchased Clara from Sichterman. And all of that was revealed in Sichterman's family papers that were found in an attic, which is like every historian's dream. So some of that was made up. A lot of the drama pieces were made up. But the overarching themes of a rhino at a dinner party and what happened to Sibylla Sichterman's children, those were all based in fact.
Okay, question number 2. You say in your author's notes that Zubin was an invented character, and I think you said some of the artwork did show a darker skinned boy, and so you kind of invented this boy from Zubin. I loved this character, and honestly, I have a hard time imagining the story without Zubin. So I guess my question is, if Zubin didn't exist, or at least didn't exist in the way that you wrote him, how would the story be different if it was just Dawa and Clara? Like, how would their relationship be changed? How would they be able to do everything they did and have, I guess, the same successes without a sidekick?
I don't think that Clara and Dawei would have made it without Zubin. When I was doing all of my initial research for this, there was a big gap in what could have possibly been the worst case scenario, which was Clara dies before she even makes it to Europe on the ship. That would have been so likely, and that did happen. It happened to rhinos that were transported around the Horn of Africa. It's why we have very little data about rhinos in the 16th and 17th centuries, because they didn't make it a lot of the time. The only thing that myself and another Clara expert in the world, her name is Glynis Ridley, could come up with was that Dawei actually had to have had some help from people who knew how to care for rhinos. Otherwise, Clara probably wouldn't have lived as long as she did. Without Zubin, though, as a character in this book, there's a lot of things that would have happened. First of all, Dawei would not have had that reality check moment that he had so many times with Zubin. Zubin brings him back down to earth a lot. Zubin offers him humanity. Zubin offers him found family. And for me, Zubin also offered him this reality that Dawei's opinion is not the only one that matters. And if you really get down to it, Dawei's kind of a selfish character. And Zubin allows him to see that there are other people that need to be cared for besides yourself, which is what we see with what happens to Zubin when he gets sick. Zubin is my absolute favorite character. And he was born of the idea that, first of all, we can't do things alone, but also there's no way that we can survive the most difficult moments in our lives without friends or family. And you'll have to forgive me. I have a little visitor with me today. My cats are all over the place.
Okay. Third question. In our chat with Julie, you talked about the twist or the surprise. And when I read it, I found so many twists and surprises in your story that I wasn't exactly sure which one you were talking about. So first question, is the surprise Janice? Because I also had the surprises about, Lonnie and Father Gregor somewhat. So I think the surprise was Janice, and I did not see it coming. I had no idea. I didn't look that deeply or anything. So congrats, Julie, hat tip. But yeah, I want to know if that was the surprise and why you decided to twist that around so that way she ended up being a bad character.
So I'm going to answer all three of these. First of all, Janice was not really my surprise. So Janice for me was always going to be the bad guy. I've actually worked in museums where there was no funding, where there were people who were not in museums for the right reasons, and where there were board members or other people working there who just didn't have the right values in mind. And when someone who is desperate for money or recognition is given an opportunity to prove themselves and an intern or someone less than them stands in their way, let me tell you, that's a common thing where people actually do have that happen. And Janice was just a prime suspect and able to make it all come to fruition for having something really nasty happen with a very valuable artifact, almost as valuable as my kitty. The big twist for me was Lonnie. So my master's thesis is actually about women in the 18th century who dressed up in men's clothing and they got onto a ship and they ended up being pirates. Cool stuff, right? It was actually fairly common. Women dressed up in men's clothing all the time to get more money. There were some in the Civil War in the United States that did that. There were lots of women who did that for merchant ships. And Lonnie's life is actually based on the real woman whose name is Jean Beret, and she was the first woman to transnavigate the world, and she sought out botanical specimens to bring back to Europe so that people could identify these new plant species. She, for me, was the big twist, and a lot of people didn't see it coming, that this small sailor character actually ends up being a woman in disguise. And I wanted there to be more strong women in this book, but that's hard to do when your main character is a real historical figure and he happens to be a dude. So that was a big one. And then Gregor was an interesting one for me. I had seen one little article about how Clara was the subject of idol worship, and that just kind of sparked something for me to have this really big bad guy in the historical timeline for the RHINO Keeper. And the thing that really got me moving forward with that was that I realized that a lot of people who were finally seeking out free time entertainment for the first time in the 18th century would have had options. They could give their money to the church or they could give their money to their free time entertainment. And that was something that the church combated the entire time, that the new norm of people actually having the time to do something really fun with their time came about.
The book is titled The RHINO Keeper. Not the rhino, not Clara, not Clara the Rhino. It's obviously a story about Clara and to honor Clara, but in naming the book The RHINO Keeper, it's Dawa's story. And I thought that was super interesting because there's so little we know about Dawa. The fact that after Clara passed, he disappeared, right? I think I looked at the Wikipedia page. We know he got married. We know he had a daughter, but we don't know anything else. So I guess my question was, why did you choose to name it The RHINO Keeper, which feels more a story about Dawa and not Clara?
I love this question. I've never been asked this. When I first realized what this story was about, I realized that it is about Clara the Rhino. But the reality is that it's a person's journey of figuring out what is important in life. Dawa had so many opportunities to settle down, to give up this crazy adventure, to betray Clara, to, get rid of her, to let her die, to have all these terrible things happen to the animal that he loved. And he chose to continue forward even though things were really, really hard. He gave up his entire career for her when he was in the VOC. He gave up love for her. He gave up a sense of home for an animal that he had no idea how long she was going to live. And I think all of us have a piece of that in us where we wonder so hard what would have happened if we would have just taken that chance. And Dawa, as the RHINO Keeper, did that. He took the chance to bring wonder to people, to care for something that could have died tomorrow. And he succeeded in bringing joy to so many people. But there's a twist to the name of this book. This book is a dual timeline. And at the very end of the book, there's a really small cameo by a character who I swear is my grandfather. He is named Alfred Brewer, just like my grandpa was. And if I were going to cast this movie, it would be Harrison Ford. And he says he was once the RHINO Keeper. The RHINO Keeper of the remains of a rhino. And so therefore you have to think about that kind of thing. Like, who actually cared for this rhino? It's people who cared for her in death. It's people who cared for her in life. It's people like Zubin. It's people like Lonnie. It's people like Dr. Wilhelm when he helped on the ship. All of these people become the RHINO Keeper. And Andrea also becomes the RHINO Keeper herself. Just like I'm a kitty keeper, All of these RHINO keepers are the reason that it's called the RHINO keeper. But in reality, the character arc of Clara is not nearly as poetic or profound as the character arc of Dawe, Zubin, and Andrea.
Andrea and the dual timeline. We didn't talk about the storyline in the dual timeline at all during the chat. But I love, in retrospect, and you'd mentioned it in the chat with Julie in the discussion, that you use the dual timeline to bring closure to the story. Because we don't know Dawa's end exactly, because we don't know what happened to the horn. You used that to come later and give the readers the closure. But what I found really interesting, and I felt this pretty early on in the book, and I don't know if you knew it as you were writing it, that you're Andrea. Because you are the one who loves animals and has a background in like history and preservation. And you're the one who found the details and found Clara and needed to tell her story. So I guess if there's a question, did you know that you were Andrea? Did you write her to mimic you or to kind of be you? Or was it subliminal and maybe you never realized it?
No, I totally did. And it was actually when I'd finished Dawe's timeline of the RHINO keeper that I knew something was missing. And so I talked to one of my mentors about it, and she said, well, what happened to Clara? Like the real story, what happened to her after she died? And I told her, well, I think she's in this museum, and, they've got this really old rhino skeleton, but it doesn't have the horn, and, the horn is in all these portraits of Clara, and all of these little details. And she said, whoa, Jillian, stop, you have to write that. Like, you can't leave all of that out. You can't leave out the fact that her horn is missing and has been for 200 years. You can't leave out the fact that you think you found her skeleton. And you can't leave out the fact that all of these artifacts exist from Clara's time in Europe that allowed you to piece together this story. It's too interesting. I said, well, how am I going to do that? She said, write yourself into it. And so I did. And it's funny because a lot of the reviews of the RHINO keeper are like, I really couldn't connect with Andrea. And there was nothing about that character that I really liked. And I'm like, well, then I don't know if you would really get along with me that well. And the first scene is what people are often talking about. It's like, the prologue of what happens to Andrea there is really very hard for people to understand. So she walks into this manor, right? And it's her boyfriend's house, and she realizes that it's a slave plantation. And off in the corner, she can hear these hunting dogs braying, and they are actually living in the slave quarters. Then she sees the Confederate flag clinking around the pole. Those two things for me would be like, whoa, where am I right now? Mom opens the door. She's drunk. It's, Thanksgiving dinner time, but I'm not a big alcohol fan. So that is also another red flag for me. She's got a little dog with her. I love a little dog. She introduces herself, but doesn't really allow Andrea to say anything. Then they go into this big hunting room where she's left by herself, and tens of thousands, up to hundreds of thousands of dollars are spent to hunt these exotic animals, even today. The lights turn on, boom, all of this crazy taxidermy is there. She literally has like a panic attack. There's my third cat. She can't be there as an animal lover. Her mom is a service dog. She can't be there as an animal lover amongst all of this death. And then when her boyfriend gets down to propose, she does the one thing that I don't know if I would be brave enough to do. And that's to say, I'm out. And everyone's like, well, how could she not have known those things? Well, the reality is no one ever told her that her boyfriend's family was from this legacy of hunters or things like that. But oftentimes I have to bring up the straw that broke the camel's back. It's a really funny analogy in this situation. When the little dog is kicked off the couch by her boyfriend Jake and makes a little whumping noise, that's it for her. She couldn't do it anymore. She saw animal abuse right in front of her, and she's like, I'm done. That's it. So yes, I totally wrote myself into that character. I wrote myself into that character in the way that I would have loved to find, hidden documents in a desk. And I did find a desk. You can see it on my TikTok and on my Instagram. I did find an 18th century desk that had all these hidden drawers in it. And I imagined it would be like to pull out a document from those. And I did find all this Clara art and piece together this map that she went on in her journeys. And all of this was so important to me that there was no way that I could just fit all this into an author's note. But I also didn't want to make it a separate book because you would lose out on the wonder that was Clara herself. So I had to write both of them.
Last question. I really want you to tell us when you're going to be at the porcelain factory. I'm gonna butcher, is it Meissen? Meissen porcelain or the Dresden porcelain? I looked it up too. I want to know when you're going to visit and how we can stream that or share that on Charm City Readers. I would love our readers to see that. If you're going to do a video, I'd love to share it on our YouTube page. So share that you're going there. You're doing, I guess, the cover reveal there. So please share that with us as well. I hope that you will come back to Charm City Readers and let me chat with you after I read the book. And yeah, tell us about your visit to the factory and when that's happening.
Yes, I am so excited. I get to go to Meissen, Germany and tour the porcelain factory. So one chapter in the RHINO Keeper talks about a porcelain maker whose name was Johann Cantler. That person absolutely captured my imagination, just like Clara the Rhino did. He made life-size porcelain animals out of porcelain for a king who was absolutely off his rocker. Kicker is you can't make porcelain that large, it totally explodes. So I delved more into this story and I found some incredible things, some really spooky history, some dark past type of stuff. It's much darker than the RHINO Keeper, but I'm so excited to bring another little known history to my readers, especially one that is connected. Clara herself makes a cameo in my next book. So the Porcelain Menageries cover I get to debut from Meissen on June 1st. I'm so excited about it. It is truly a companion novel. It really is. It once again delves into some really incredible animals that really existed back in the 18th centuries, and this time artists and a really strong woman who needs to have her story told in the best light possible. So that one's coming up and I'm pumped about it. The actual delivery date for that book won't be until October is when it debuts, but pre-orders will be live when I debut the cover from Meissen, Germany, from both the castle called Albrechtsburg, that's a 10th century castle, and from the porcelain factory itself, where I get to see the real porcelain menagerie. Probably gonna cry. And yes, absolutely, I would love to come back and talk to Charm City about my next project and have you guys show that cover video too. I don't even know what it's gonna look like. I get to go to the Dresden Green Vault. I get to go see the porcelain menagerie itself. I get to see the factory. I get to see the castles. I get to see everything all bundled up into one incredible trip, and I get to go with my family, so I'm super excited about that. So yeah, cover reveal and then pre-order link will be live then. But yeah, anytime you want me to come back, I'm all yours. I hope these work out and that my cats weren't too crazy. It's always so nice to talk to you, and let's go live next time and do this again. Thank you so much for reading the RHINO Keeper, and I'm just looking at my cat destroying things. Thank you so much for reading the RHINO Keeper, and I can't wait to see what you think of my next one.
Okay. And lastly, I just want to thank you. I know you didn't expect to be pulled into the chat with Julie and I, and you were so gracious that you were going to join us. And honestly, the whole chat, as I wanted to read the book and I felt really horrible that I hadn't read it, because having you there and you were so open and so sharing, I felt like I'd cheated myself by not reading it. That wasn't the point of Untold Stories, right? The point was that I didn't know the book and I got to react to the book. But I think next time we do this, I want to read the book and then hopefully have you on to talk about it, because it's just brilliant. And I am a bit terrified of this next book, and the King. I'm a bit freaked out. But I know you're going to do a great job and I can't wait to talk about it with you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
You should totally be freaked out by this next King. I just gave my audiobook artist like a character sketch of him, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty scary guy that I wrote. But it's a story that needs to be told right now. You'll know exactly what I mean when you get there.